By acquiring a causal envelope, the monad passes from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom. To term this process causalization is preferable to individualization, since the monad is an individual in all kingdoms. The causal envelope is the permanent envelope of the human monad until it essentializes and passes to the fifth natural kingdom. It is this envelope which incarnates, and in doing so evolves into four lower envelopes which are soon to be dissolved. At mankind's present stage of development, man activates consciousness mainly in his emotional and mental envelopes. Consciousness development in the human kingdom can be divided into 5 principal stages, comprising a total of 777 levels of development. The table below shows which molecular consciousness the monad thereby activates. At the stage of barbarism, he has activated 48.5-7 in the emotional and 47.7 in the mental. At the stage of civilization, he has activated 48.4-7 in the emotional and 47.6 and 7 in the mental. At the stage of culture, he has activated 48.3-7 in the emotional and 47.6-7 in the mental. At the stage of humanity, he has activated 48.2-7 in the emotional and 47.4-7 in the mental. And at the stage of ideality, he has activated 47.2-7 in the emotional and 47.2-7 in the mental. The Philosopher's Stone by Laurency gives a more detailed account of the different stages of development. The number of individuals counted among our planet's mankind, causalized here or transferred hither, amount to some 60,000 million, that is, 60 billion. They are in the physical, emotional, mental, and causal worlds of our planet, most of them asleep in their causal envelopes, since they have no possibility of causal consciousness, pending a new incarnation. The passing of these monads from the animal to the human kingdom occurred in 5 different epochs, the last one some 18 million years ago, the individuals from the 4 earlier epochs being transferred later from another planet. The causal envelope of men thus are of widely different stages, which fact explains the different stages of development. Those who have reached the highest stage have some 150,000 incarnations behind them, those at the lowest some 30,000. In this connection, one ought to consider the fact that the capacity of consciousness is doubled in each higher molecular kind, so that the numbers of incarnations cannot themselves be compared in this respect. The Western declaration that God created all men equal thus is as great an error as the fiction of the Indian philosophers that all are gods. God cannot create a single monad, only give the monads the opportunity of being introduced into cosmic manifestation. Certainly, sometime all monads will attain the highest divine stage, but before that, they will have to be involved down to the physical world, and after that, to mount the seemingly endless graduation of developmental levels from the mineral to the highest divine kingdom. It should be obvious from the above that men's moral judgments of each other are the criticisms of ignorance and the unjustified verdicts of hatred. Men are neither good nor evil. They are on a certain level of development and know no better. To this must be added the effects of the law of destiny and the law of reaping. To understand this, it is also important to know that during times of upheaval, the clans at the highest stages do not incarnate to any great extent. Of those incarnated at present, more than 85% are at the lowest 2 stages. Most of the remaining 15% are of the unobtrusive, quiet kind of people. Unless they have been given special tasks, they incarnate chiefly in those countries where they have the best prospects of finding others on the same level. Those at the stage of humanity who have not had the opportunity to study esoterics feel themselves outsiders, not understanding why, and put the blame for this upon themselves. This is, regrettably, the rule. They were once initiates, and thereafter have remained seekers after the so-called lost word of the master, esoterics. They have the knowledge as an instinct, not knowing its cause, and thus they are uncertain. In the physical world, man is an organism with an etheric envelope. He has two kinds of physical consciousness. The sense perceptions of the organism allow him to apprehend objectively the material forms in the lowest three molecular kinds. The vibrations in the molecular kinds of the etheric envelope are still apprehended only subjectively by most people. Visible realities are the only ones man knows of, and they are for him the only real ones. He takes his feelings and thoughts to be just subjective apprehensions, having no idea of the fact that they correspond to vibrations in the molecular kinds of higher worlds. He knows nothing of his higher envelopes, being quite unaware of the fact that when he experiences feelings, it is his attention, the monad, moving to his emotional envelope. And when he is thinking, it is the monad moving to his mental envelope. He does not know that he is a monad in a causal envelope. The individual at the stage of barbarism as a physical self only, without emotional and mental consciousness worth mentioning, belongs to the very lowest levels of the stage of barbarism. Immediately after causalization, he is little more than an animal, often not even that intelligent. His life in the emotional world between incarnations is of very short duration. He soon lapses into dreamless sleep in his causal envelope, being incapable of employing the consciousness of his mental envelope. On the higher levels of the stage of barbarism, his mental consciousness is activated to the extent that he is able to draw simple conclusions. As an emotional self, at the stages of civilization and culture, the individual is in his thought and action determined by emotional motives. The emotional stage is the most difficult stage of development. At this stage, man must by himself acquire consciousness in all 6 molecular kinds of his emotional envelope, and in the lowest 2 molecular kinds of his mental envelope. To the emotional stage belongs almost everything that man today regards as civilization and culture. The emotional stage is divided into the 2 stages of civilization and culture, each of which presents a great number of levels. The emotional consciousness of the civilizational individual seldom extends beyond the lower 3 or 4 molecular kinds. His mental consciousness seldom beyond the lowest 2. With this modest intellectual capacity, he intellectualizes his desires into such feelings as normally exist in the lower regions of the emotional world. Generally, they are of the repulsive kind. At the stage of culture, the 3 higher molecular kinds of the emotional envelope are activated. The pertaining vibrations in the emotional world are mainly attractive. Having once attained these regions, the individual can gradually free himself from the tendency, since long acquired, to a repulsive attitude to the surrounding world and to himself. His feelings become more and more ennobled on each higher level and supersede his previous receptivity to the countless expressions of hatred of the repulsive vibrations. For everything that is not love is hatred. On the highest cultural levels, the individual becomes a mystic. In the domains of emotional consciousness that he has now reached, he no longer has any use for his intellectuality as acquired up to now. Frequently in states of ecstasy, he experiences the unity of life past all understanding. His imagination, which develops powerfully, makes him lose himself in seeming infinitude. His emotional development is terminated and crowned by an incarnation as a saint. In subsequent incarnations, he strives to become a mental self. The mental stage is divided into the stages of humanity and ideality, or the causal stage. The humanist activates consciousness in the lower 4 mental molecular kinds, the idealist in all 6. The humanist is a mental self, the idealist a causal self. The most distinctive trait of the humanist is his striving after common sense, a prerequisite of the acquisition of causal intuition. He can no longer, like the mystic, lose himself in the ineffable, but demands above all clarity in everything and facts for everything. His indomitable will to comprehend reality and understand life despite everything compels him always to seek further. The ever longer periods spent in the mental world between incarnations during which time he can work up his ideas undisturbed, react upon this endeavor of his. He becomes more and more receptive to the inspirations of his elder brothers in the fifth natural kingdom. When he has come to this Socratian realization that man cannot know anything worth knowing, he is ready to receive the esoteric knowledge. In the old days, he would then have been chosen to be initiated into some secret knowledge order. Nowadays, he is given the knowledge in a mental system of the fundamental facts of existence, which his reason compels him to accept as the only tenable working hypothesis. Using the knowledge gained, it is possible for him to activate ever higher kinds of consciousness until, one day, the world of intuition opens up before him, and he becomes able to ascertain facts about reality and life by himself, as well as to study his previous incarnations as man. Then he also sees how hopeless it is for man with his insufficient means to acquire this knowledge, how almost impossible it is for most people to even grasp it. Starting from their own petty belief systems or thought systems, they imagine themselves able to judge everything by this. He sees that people's life of consciousness, apart from ascertaining facts in the visible physical world, consists of emotional illusions and mental fictions. He sees, too, how futile it is to do what Plato did, to hint at the existence of a world of ideals. Now he knows that it exists. As a causal self, he acquires knowledge of the laws of life and the ability to make rational use of this knowledge with one pointed purpose. He sees that the mistakes of ignorance as to these laws are no crimes against the deity, that all the good and evil that man meets with are his own work. He gets into communication with those in higher kingdoms, and receives from them the further facts he needs but cannot ascertain for himself. He gradually acquires the 12 essential qualities which make it possible for him to pass into the fifth natural kingdom. These are enumerated in the esoteric account of the 12 labors of Heracles, which have been totally distorted in the exoteric legend. Man's 5 envelopes all have their own consciousness and their own tendencies. Those of the organism are inherited from one's parents. The qualities and abilities, etc., that the self acquires in its emotional and mental envelopes have their correspondences in a cluster of atoms, or skandhas, are preserved by the causal envelope and used at reincarnation. It is the task of the self to learn to master its envelopes, so that they submit to its will. This is no easy task, since the tendencies of the envelopes are the results of habits from thousands of incarnations. At mankind's present stage of development, the emotional controls the physical. Man still has to learn to control the emotional by the mental, and more than good resolutions is needed to do that. It can take many lives once one has seen the need for it. When the individual leaves his worn-out organism with its etheric envelope, he goes on living in his emotional envelope and, when this is dissolved, in his mental envelope. And when this too is dissolved, he waits, asleep in his causal envelope, to be reborn into the physical world, which is incomparably the most important, since it is in this world that all human qualities must be acquired, and it is only in this world that he has the possibility of freeing himself from emotional illusions and mental fictions. Life between incarnations is a period of rest in which man does not learn anything new. The sooner the self can free itself from its envelopes of incarnation, the quicker it develops. At the same time as the etheric envelope frees itself from the organism, in the so-called process of death, the emotional envelope frees itself from the etheric envelope, which remains near the organism and dissolves along with it. Man's life in the emotional world can prove completely different for different individuals, depending on their levels of development. Like the physical world, the emotional world has 6 successively higher regions. Most people are nowadays objectively conscious from the beginning in the 3 regions that correspond to the lower 3 regions of the physical world. Mental consciousness, however, remains subjective. Objects in those regions are material counterparts of the material forms of the physical world, which fact often causes the newcomer to think that he still lives in the physical world. During this first period, the individual can also associate with his friends in the physical world when they are asleep. Without esoteric knowledge, he believes, like everybody else, that the highest region in this new world of his is heaven and his final destination in eternity. The emotional envelope dissolves gradually, first its lowest molecular kind, then the lowest but one, etc. When the lowest three have dissolved, it is not possible for the individual to contact the visible physical world. There are those who already in the process of physical death are able to free themselves from the lower three molecular kinds of their emotional envelope. In the three higher regions of the emotional world, the existing material forms are imaginative creations made by the individuals in those regions, for emotional matter forms itself in accordance with the slightest hint from consciousness, the ignorant neither understanding the cause nor being able to grasp how it happened. The individual seldom learns anything really new while in the emotional world, and in the mental world, never. The life of the emotional envelope can vary as greatly as that of the organism. After the dissolution of the emotional envelope, the individual in his mental envelope leads a life of thought that is absolutely subjective, not suspecting the impossibility of apprehending objective reality in this world. But apprehension of reality, bliss and perfection, of omniscience and omnipotence is absolute. All his fantasies become absolute realities to him. Everything he wishes is instantly there, and all his friends, all the quote-unquote great ones of mankind are with him, all equally perfect. The independent life of the mental envelope can vary from a minute or so, in the case of the barbarian, to thousands of years. It all depends on how many ideas the individual has collected during physical life and how vital they are. Plato is said to have material to work up for 10,000 years. Upon the dissolution of the mental envelope, the individual in his causal envelope begins to sink into a dreamless sleep that will last until the time comes for rebirth and an embryo has been formed for him in the physical maternal body. He awakens with a desire for a new life and forms instinctively, by means of his causal envelope, new mental and emotional envelopes, these being the necessary communication links. It will be the task of the growing child to use its latent qualities to develop the ability of consciousness in them. There can be no conscious causal life unless the intuition of the causal ideas has been acquired in the physical existence. It is, besides, in the physical that everything must be acquired. The monad's continuity of consciousness, made possible through the memory in its envelopes of incarnation now dissolved, has been lost. The causal envelope, however, preserves the memory of all the human incarnations and of the experiences had, of insight and understanding gained, of qualities and abilities acquired. Everything is there as rudiments in new incarnations. How much, or rather how little of it all will be actualized anew, depends on the individual's new opportunities of remembering anew and developing his latent qualities.